All right, we're kind of having a slow start. That is on my shoulders, not yours. But we have on the schedule talking about diagrams today, which we will do. And I would presume that your exams, okay, that's what we're going to say it, exams would be on the 17th and 18th. So next Monday and Tuesday, we will clear the air on anything else that needs to be looked at, discussed, because these exams are big, and that's just the way it is because there is so much content to talk about. So we have 2 days to review yet next week, so that time is yours to utilize how you see fit. Okay? So we'll talk more about that on Monday and Tuesday. So I want to just make a mental note now. So I will write this over on the board that, okay, so I'm just going to put test 17A and then test 17B. So I remember to, which means part 1 and 2. On your handout, you have this page here. Is probably the very last page that has some of these page numbers on there. Okay. So what I want you to do is open up to page 652. Okay. Okay, so on page 652, it says figure 17.3. Now, it's not all of that. What we are looking at is this structure right here. I just made a mental note. It's the lower left-hand corner because this is what you would see inside your small intestine because it has a lot of the portions or structures and certainly the functions that we've talked about in class. Going all the way back to when we're talking about peristalsis, what would that mean to you? What is a normal peristaltic, or which means peristalsis? What is a normal peristaltic movement to you? What does that mean to you? And normally we refer to that within the small intestine, because peristalsis on its own is what? Has something to do with this or that, something we talked about in class. It has something to do with muscles. Okay, you for sure got the second one right. I didn't quite hear the first one. Okay, longitudinal. Longitudinal, it's spherical or circular. Those are two different types of movements that take place within the small intestine. And peristalsis is a rhythmic contraction that takes place and moves food materials through your digestive tract. You could use your esophagus as a clue too. That's peristalsis because it's moving in one direction. But mainly within the small intestine, we associate that because here it has those two different types of identifications. And you can see at the very bottom where it says muscular layer that these muscles are just that. They are long. They are elongated. Then up above that, you can see the muscular structures like this, which would mean they are circular. Okay? And then we want you to know those for sure. And I need to find a pencil because I want to make mental note of this as well. Okay. Okay. So I've got these identifications on there, which there are 7. I mean, there's a whole lot more that we can throw on there, but then we're going back to the stearic acid and salicylic acid demonstration, or with this as well. If we have this much content, and then this SDSU cup is how much information you can hold, eventually we pour this in, it's just going to overflow. Okay, so on page 652, we want you to know this, lacteal. Villi is certainly important. Okay, mucosa, of course, is important. Submucosa. And then the muscular layer, which there's two. Which we had talked about. You have longitudinal ones, and you can see those fibers. They look like they line up like this because they are nice and long. And then you can see a cross-section of the circular ones. That's just what they are, spherical or circular motion. So those are your two different types of layers that you see within the muscular layer. Okay. Cross off. Page 664, we're not going to cover that. Then page 662. Okay. So for those of you tuning in later, this was 652, and we said 662. We'll kind of color coordinate these so we can tell the difference with them. On page 662, okay, we want you to know the fundus. Okay, the body, that is a very vague term. That comes up multiple times within the human body. It can be a structure on a bone, it can be a structure within a gland, or it can be a structure within an organ. Okay. And then it says cardia, but we want to refer to that as cardiac opening. So once you see that, what does that mean to you if we're talking about the cardiac opening?
Cardiac is higher heart.
Right, so that means it's higher in the stomach, not lower. And that's where we get that characteristic idea of heartburn, because this is the opening that goes from the esophagus into your stomach. And if that starts to prolapse or release, well then that's where that acid from your stomach refluxes into your esophagus, and that's why they call it acid reflux. So if we have an opening at the top, what's the opening at the bottom called? It starts with a P. Well, you could say that too, but the opening to the small intestine, you're getting closer. It feels like we're playing hangman here. Pyloric opening, that's right. Pyloric opening. And then, of course, we want this one too. The esophagus. And all those characteristic folds that you see are called rugae. It says gastric folds, but it's also referred to as rugae, and I think that will make more sense for us, so we will refer to it as that. And then finally on page 668, oh, we're getting closer. Yes, yes ma'am. So on page 668, okay, There's all sorts of duct work there that we want you to be responsible for. So 668. Okay. So all ducts. Now, that could be a very vague term. So what would you presume that we mean when we say all ducts? So there's the bile duct is one, the hepatic duct. Okay, now can we be a little more specific?
There's 3 of them, but there's actually 2 of them, but they're all called hepatic.
That's right. You have a left hepatic, a right hepatic, a common hepatic duct. Okay, then coming out of the gallbladder, the cystic duct, and then finally when they all come together to empty into the small intestine, it's the first one we had mentioned, you can just say bile duct or common. Bile duct is fine. I believe that's what they refer to this here on this diagram. So some people say common bile duct, but just plain bile duct is fine. Let's just keep this as simple as possible. Okay. And then what is the first portion of the small intestine? Yep. Duodenum, duodenum. Depends how you want to pronounce it. Okay. And then this because there is a difference. The tail of the pancreas is on the right side, the head of the pancreas is on the left side. Now, some of these identifications can overlap because on page 668, we have not wrote this term yet, but it's also found in a different diagram that we talked about. Because what is the junction of the stomach to the small intestine called? It's an opening. That would be to the large intestine. Okay?
What's the question?
So what is the name of the muscular opening from the stomach into the small intestine? Or you could say the duodenum. It's a specific sphincter area. We've identified it already. It's also on page 668 as well. Wrong side. Yeah. So if you look at this diagram, we also see that the pyloric opening is right here. And even though we're not writing this down, we do have it over here. So some of these identifications on one diagram can also be placed on another. Okay? So that does 2, 3, 4. I think that does it for that diagram. And then, let's see here. Page 682.
Is this our last one?
This is the last one. Okay? So then on page 683, okay? Okay. So in general, what do you think you are looking at on page 683 when you see the cecum? Yeah, it's going to be the large intestine. So we want you to know the cecum. Okay. And then what do we see when something is going up? What part of the colon is that? The ascending colon. Okay, so that is this one. I'll just put ascending colon. Then what happens when we go across like this? Wouldn't be descending. Say that again. This is the transverse colon. Okay, so transverse. And then what would be the opposite of ascending? The descending colon. Descending colon. So we can just put DC here. Okay. Then the last one would be just this one, ileum. So the reason that we want you to know the ileum is because which portion of the small intestine don't we see up here as an identification? Because there are three. The jejunum or duodenum or whichever. Did you tune into the Science Channel? Oh, okay. Because we were doing some, what do you say, self-defense? Kind of like, sounds like a self-defense deal. Like, yeah, I know, right? Like jujitsu, I think, is one, but duodenum and, yeah. All right. That's a lot. I think that is enough. So, and then we've talked about all of them on page 680. It talks about amylase. We know what that is. Pepsin, we know what that does. Gastric lipase, we know what that does. Pancreatic amylase, we know what that does. Pancreatic lipase, we know what that does. Trypsin, we know what that does. And then also enterokinase. Then you have some of those other vocab terms that were added. Okay, that was probably a lot of content in a short amount of time, but keep in mind, you have time on Monday and Tuesday. So it's not like we're saying you have this exam right away next week. We still all have a lot of things going on, and we want to evaluate you on what you know. And what typically happens is I usually say that the fall semester is usually just considered as physiology. Okay? Physiology means you're talking about the function of what's taking place in the stomach and small intestine. Yes, there's some anatomy that goes along with that. The functions of the enzymes, that is physiology. There's other aspects we could say there's physiology. In the spring is where we get to the anatomy part, and that's going to be just pretty much mainly structures. The skeleton, the muscles, identification of the skeleton. So for a lot of you, if you remember from 1 and 2 years ago, when you had completed the biology course here, or biology curriculum or exam in the spring, all you had to know was, for instance, the humerus, which is your upper arm bone. There's a lot more structures that are associated with that than just the humerus, but that is in the spring. That's why we say that's mainly anatomy, because that's dealing with structure, just like this does. But there's more so physiology that's correlated with this content. All right. We have about 20 minutes. It is your time. There's other things going on. You have time to reflect upon these diagrams and maybe make note on how to break these up on what works best for you. And we'll again look at these on Monday and Tuesday. All right, so last thing is your short answer papers. Make sure your names are on them, and I will collect them. And as far as the rest of the class period goes, I'm just going to stop it now, and we will tune in to you or catch up with you next time.